These are all different stories that we're now shooting all of these details towards. The vanishing point. We have, the details especially have to follow the perspective properly. That's the only way that this is going to work. If the inner shapes do not follow the perspective properly, then it's going to look very, very mismatched. And so that's definitely not the experience that we want the viewer to have when they look at our art. We don't want them to be confused. We want them to know exactly what they're looking at. Okay. So just as we created, different elements within our piece, we're able to create more and more and more understanding of a lot of these objects purely based off of perspective. Okay. Now we can continue to add other buildings. We just need to add in more of these shapes, create more the floor plans to understand what our shapes are doing. And so we can basically just keep on creating buildings after buildings after buildings using this very, very generalized method. Okay, so basically, now let's do one more as we can look up. All right, this we're pretty much almost eye level. This one we're looking from an aerial shot. Okay, aerial down shot. This one is going to be an upshot. So we're going to draw the horizon line lower. HL, horizon line, VP1, another one, VP2, and we're going to have one more, VP3. Now because this is the sky and this is the earth, the floor plan still has to sit on the ground. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Unless you want it to be floating, then it's a little bit different. Let's go ahead and draw the guidelines up towards the third vanishing point. We will now extrude the shape. Let's create a mark right on the middle line, the point closest to us. Okay, we'll reduce that one as well. And then now we're just going to go ahead and fill in that shape. The shape here is actually doing pretty well. It's a building that we're looking very, very up at. It is a tall block. It makes us feel very small. It's definitely giving us a lot of sense of scale, and more importantly, it's giving off a sense that we're very small. Okay, so then this is probably where we want to kind of understand some of the rules of perspective and what they do, and how can we use them in different ways. So, right off of the bat here, and you can start definitely getting this with 2-point perspective as well, but for 3-point, the example is very, very clear, is that we want to be able to use these by understanding the positioning of the camera. Eye level, down shot, up shot. Okay. Now, when we look at something that's eye level, we feel that we're basically on the same scale. The thing that we're looking at doesn't seem too large. We feel like we're at the same level as that object or that person or that thing. And it also makes us feel like we're on a competitive side. The aerial downshot, this does a couple of things. Number one, it can really show massive sense of scale because you can see so much of the ground. The second thing that it also does is it makes us feel like we're on top of it. We feel like we're more powerful. We feel like we're looking down on something. We feel elevated. We feel a bit empowered. Okay. The third sample, the upshot, we feel small. We're looking up. It's almost like we're looking up at a statue, a giant, looking at a tall skyscraper. We're in awe. We are, humbled in its presence. So these are three different types of emotional communication that happens just through perspective. Now, it's a very funny thing because perspective is usually just learning a bunch of rules, learning a bunch of guidelines and what to do and what not to do, but no one really tells us why should we use a certain type of perspective shot? Why are we learning all of these rules for something that sounds so boring? But in actuality, this becomes one of the key things that effective concept artists and painters use to evoke a particular emotion to the viewer, and that's essentially what we want as a concept artist. So, but before going more into that, I want to talk a little bit more about these samples here. Let's see. So in this sample here, we see the three vanishing points. We see a cube in the middle. One thing that I definitely want you guys to realize is that this is pretty much what we're going to see within the dotted lines. The vanishing points, notice, are way off of the page. It doesn't really allow for effective viewing if we can see everything. Another good example is right over here. This essentially shows us the needed extra room to be able to effectively create three-point perspective and what is actually shown within the shot, becomes very important to realize. Now, here's another example of some very, very base perspective. It allows us to see the three-point in use. It allows us to also get a different idea of one object that we can see through different eyes, different angularity, and different practice. Okay? So these are probably things that we're going to want to really kind of touch up on. And as you practice three-point perspective more, you're going to really see the difference in what your artwork ends up looking like. Okay? So that's basic lessons for three-point perspective. We're understanding the 1 point, the 2 point, and the 3 point. Let's go ahead and cross this off of the list. And so now let's go into understanding when to use what. Okay? Now, going back to our previous understanding and lesson is that we have the, let me actually pop open a few examples of artwork. Okay, now I have up Dylan Cole, Craig Mullins, and another Dylan Cole painting. Now these paintings here really give us a nice extreme angle view of different things with different perspective angles and allowing us to really see the effectiveness of what we're looking at. This first Craig Mullins painting is really interesting in that it allows us to see a very intimate space. Look at the extreme angles of three-point perspective. Now I'm just going to hit the verticals so you can automatically see where our third vanishing point really is. It's pretty much off of the page right around here. Okay, that's the third point. That's the point in which we were just practicing. But now it gives us such a nice sense of space. It gives us a realistic kind of view of what we're looking at. We do feel elevated. We do feel that we're somewhat on top of and looking at an overall general kind of scale of this place. So the perspective is very, very nicely used here. Here's a vast open shot. Okay. Now this one is pretty much a 3-point perspective shot. However, it is now using the idea of the aerial shot. Okay. This one, we're also looking down from a elevated point of view. However, here we're looking at it from a much more extreme point of view. Okay, this 3rd-point perspective angle is going to be way, 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 way down here. Okay, like where the point of my pen is down here, that's probably where the actual vanishing point is, way below. So it just lets us know how high we really are and how elevated of a point of view we're really looking at this. So we get to see a lot of space. We get to see a lot of scale. It's very impressive. Now, if you're trying to do an establishing shot or show some sort of epic scale, this is probably a type of exercise or a practice that you're going to want to use. It's going to be really important to try to pick that up. Here's another type of 3-point perspective shot. However, now we're looking up. Okay. Now the thing is, in this one, we feel small. We feel like there's towering bits of architecture. We feel like the scale is not in our favor. We feel like there's a big obstacle ahead of us. So you can kind of see the major difference between this and this. And pull that out real quick. Between these two having such a different kind of communication to the viewer. Very, 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 very different sensibilities. So as we're doing concept art, it becomes that important, guys, to really kind of focus in on what are we trying to show. And I know this is jumping the gun a little bit because we're just trying to learn the foundation. But I'm just giving you guys some insight of what's going to be happening up here when after the foundation is set. Why is it so important to have this solid foundation? Is so that we don't fall over. Our building doesn't collapse. Okay, so just giving you guys a little bit of an insight on why perspective becomes so important. Now we're going to look at more of these exemplary artists to understand that. All right, so now we have a couple examples here of Scott Robertson's perspective sketches. Now, Scott is an amazing instructor, an amazing concept artist and designer. Industrial designer as well, and just taking a look at what type of complex designs and accurate measurements, accurate design replication, okay, that you can get from just simply understanding very, very, very solid perspective, okay? It becomes just the most important thing that we can realistically think about. So, what are we going to do here, guys? Let's study this stuff. So we can kind of look over here, and these are just a bunch of cars, but the cool thing is especially this drawing right here, is you can see the vanishing point, and you can see all of the lines in which Scott was using to basically create this automobile in this perspective shot. You can see a lot of his markings here that help him to actually, the little measurement marks for him to actually create proper, measurements and making sure that he's drawing through the form in this effective way. So Much of what we're seeing here is very complex perspective. It takes years and years of practice to get to this level. Um, Gosh, years and years and years of just perspective, practice, and understanding your craft, understanding your tools, and understanding your material. So Scott is a very, very good example of this. Let's also look at this one over here. Now, this boat is a very, very interesting shape. Um, but notice that he's starting off with a very simplified rectangle, finding the center and being able to make sure that we're drawing from the same measurement point here and here and drawing it accurately to the center point. Now, understanding these rules becomes so important when you're trying to create any type of a prop, any type of a design. Let's say if you're doing vehicle designs and you want to show a 3D modeler your awesome design, well, some of this is going to be the most important communication tools that you're going to have to be able to show off that awesomeness. Now, I would encourage you guys to always keep this in mind as it becomes such an important tool for us as concept artists to practice this. Okay, so we have a lot of interesting things that we're looking at here. You can see how Scott is drawing down the form, right? Trying to find where they meet within this floor plan that he's created. You know, drawing the guidelines properly to extrude the form. You know, all of these things become very, very important. Now, lastly, here's another small sketch that Scott had done. It really shows some of the it shows the understanding of how to create this form in perspective while also making sure that we stay accurate to the design itself. So you can kind of see how Scott has utilized base perspective understanding as well as very, very accurate measurements to make sure that happens. Okay, so as we're starting to wrap up this important lesson, let's do a quick review. So the review is going to be very, very simplified. Let's just talk about the basic rules of 1, 2, and 3 point. Let's talk about when to use these. And we just did a little bit of photo analysis, breakdown, and then we're going to just talk about your homework assignment. Okay, so as we learned, 1 point perspective is exactly that, using 1 point. We always want to make sure that we start off by drawing the horizon line first, establishing our vanishing point, and then going into drawing out our flat boxes, creating our guidelines, and extruding the shape. Now we did the duplicating exercise here. Always remember, guys, to label your horizon line, label your vanishing points, please. Also, it is a very, very good habit to identify what type of exercise that you're doing. Even when you're drawing in your sketchbook, even if you're drawing outside for just 10 minutes, and you could say outdoor sketch, 3 p.m. on 12/27/2014. You know, you guys can really, for example, create that sense of time and place by just giving it a little bit of a identifier, okay? Now with 1 point perspective, all the lines that go to the vanishing point are actually 100% parallel, okay? We understood that by studying this railroad vanishing point illustration here, okay? Two-point perspective. Now going into same thing, the horizon line, make sure we label that. identify 2 vanishing points, draw out your lines, establish your floor plan, okay? And so this is what we came up with during the demo. Now, 2-point perspective is that you want to really show the floor plan and extrude your forms. So that's exactly what we did. Now, making sure that we stay close to the format of the demo just for practice is going to be pretty good, because then you can rewatch the demo if you have any questions or if you're lost, and make sure you take good notes along the way, because then during our Q&A session you can just ask anything you want to your heart's desire. Here's a pyramid drawn really quickly in perspective, okay, with the proper quarter cutouts, you know, half of the height, or excuse me, half of the width being into the middle of the actual pyramid. The angle of the rise is at 45 degrees. So this is very, very general perspective rules. Now perspective, there's actually a ton more that goes into perspective, such as creating complex shapes, lighting and shadows, as well as creating curved shapes, you know, circles, ellipses, and other complex forms. Now, 3-point perspective, same thing. Draw out your horizon line, 2 vanishing points on the page, or excuse me, on the horizon line itself. One either way up high or way down low. Now this is an extreme down shot. We have an eye level and an extreme upshot, all using the same methods of 3-point perspective. However, we're just changing the angularity or the flatness of the guidelines. Okay, remember that. The flatness or the extreme angularity of the guidelines will give you these different types of boxes. Okay, so that's definitely something I would like for you guys to practice. So, when do we use these? Again, we were talking very simply about some of the emotional communication that happens when we're looking up at something versus looking down at something versus looking directly at it. So, that is exactly what we're going to be practicing. So, for example, while looking at this photo, it's a very, very nice photo of this building. The building is 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 stories tall. It's not a huge building, but the angularity, okay, the perspective shot of this picture gives it such a dynamic sensibility. It is essentially utilizing this communication here plus this viewpoint, these two together, to create this shot. Now, what do we see here when we're looking? What do we kind of understand that what we're looking at? Number one, it feels like it's coming directly at us because of the severe angularity. What else has this type of angularity? Well, you know, imagine a truck that just drives right past your face. And it's just zooming right by. It's going to have this sort of extreme angularity. Things that are coming directly at you when you're driving very, very fast down a very small, tight road, you're going to get this type of dynamic angularity. So this has a lot of energy within its shot, giving us that sense of dynamic viewpoint. Now, the fact that we're also much smaller than the building, we're looking up at it as well. Combine all of those together gives us a very dynamic and awe-inspiring type of viewpoint. Okay. Now later in the mentorship, we'll be talking about all sorts of things like the color palette, the sense of lighting, the power of the silhouette. We're going to be talking about all of these things, but the first major component that we're going to be discussing is why this image looks good. It has to do with the perspective and the POV, the point of view, where the camera is situated. So this gives us a bit of nice things to talk about here. Now, similar, okay, we still have a pretty extreme two-point perspective. Not extreme, but actually just kind of average, right? We're looking not up and we're not looking down. We're looking directly at it. The horizon line is right here. That means that we're pretty much on 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth floor of a building across the street. That means we're looking directly out. So this horizon down here, that means that we're about this high off of the ground. This height here translated to our viewpoint. So now, now when we look at this shot, we're saying, okay, we don't see a lot of extreme angles. It looks a little bit less dynamic. Okay, it's definitely showcasing the building as a focal point, but now we get to see a little bit less of its emotional content of driving a dynamic shot or making us feel small or making the object look very impressive, but we just get a good understanding of maybe the height of this building, the scale. We get a good clear sensibility of the street, of the surrounding neighborhood, as well as the design of the building itself. So it actually communicates a little bit differently. This shot over here, okay, also two-point perspective, also letting us know what we're looking at. We're very, very, very high up. We're about this high off of the ground, so I don't know what that is, maybe like 30, 40 floors up, or maybe even higher. And we feel very, very tall. We feel like we're on top of the world. We're seeing a viewpoint of the city that not many people get to see. We see vastness. We look how far out on the horizon line you can see. So these three photos here actually give us such a nice sense of what perspective can do just purely based off of what we're looking at and the angle we're looking at. So as we start to gear our minds, all of this learning for concept art for games and film, this is what we want you guys to really, really pay attention to. Now, you can look at all of these photos, you can look at all of these different types of concept art now and really get a solid understanding about, oh, okay, now I understand why certain artists did this or that, and it becomes very, very, very inspiring to kind of see that happen, especially with an artist that you admire or look up to. You know, it's definitely really nice to look at other artwork and analyze it and say, oh, I think I understand what the artist was trying to do here. Look at the perspective angle that they chose. Look at the dynamic perspective. Look at the camera position. What did they do? What choices did they make in order to create this impressive image? And those are the things that we're definitely going to be talking about much more as the course continues, but this is definitely one of the core elements of why perspective is very, very important for all of our learning. Okay, so that's basically the lesson here. Okay, now let's talk about the homework assignment. So let me just clean this up really quickly and we'll talk about that. Okay, so now I'm going to cross these off of the list. Okay, and now let's talk about your assignment. So your assignment is going to be actually a little bit more extensive here, as there is a lot of material to go over. Okay, now one of the things that we're going to do first is to understand your material. Okay, to understand material, we are going to find 3 photos in 1-point perspective. We're going to find 3 photos in 2-point perspective. And we're going to find 3 photos in 3-point perspective. Now the plan for us is, what are we going to do with these photos? We are going to find and outline your horizon line, your VPs, and then make sure that you basically do the right number of vanishing points for your 1-point, your 2-point, and your 3-point. And we're going to figure out, and you're going to draw your guidelines. Okay, now what does that essentially look like? Well, it looks like the photo that I drew right on top of to find some of these perspective lines. Okay, so pretty much something right along the lines of something like this. Okay, so I'm just going to put that right over here, and that is essentially what we want to do. Okay, and this is just an example. So the thing is that we need to have 9. Okay, this is photo perspective understanding. 9 total submissions. Okay, now that is part 1 of the assignment. It's very, very simple. It's just getting your eyes and your brain functioning to look at perspective more accurately. Okay, now what are we going to do next? We're going to draw perspective. We're going to actually be outlining and duplicating all of the steps that we just did. Okay, so what are we going to do? You're going to do perspective exercises. The first assignment is for 1-point perspective is you're going to do 1 page of boxes. You're going to do an interior scene, and you're going to do a city exterior. Now, the boxes, we'll just explain this very quickly, is you want to do as many boxes as you can to effectively create to be able to practice this step. So I'm going to put a minimum of 10 boxes. Okay. Okay. So however many pages it takes for you to do 10 boxes, that's up to you. You can spread it out over the different pages as well if you like. Now the second one is going to be 2-point perspective. You're going to do 10 boxes minimum. You're going to do an interior of a room with furniture, and you're going to do a city exterior scene. Okay, now you can obviously use the same city, the same interior room, or you can make them different, but the major differentiating factor is that you are going to be certain that that you cannot, you can use the same material, but you're essentially having to draw these out many, many different times. Okay, and then the last one is you're going to do 3-point perspective the same manner. You're going to do minimum of 10 boxes, an interior scene and an exterior scene. So in total, you are going to have 9 let's see. You're going to have 9 perspective submissions. 3 in 1-point, 3 in 2-point, and 1, 2, 3 in 3-point. Okay, so I know it's starting to catch up pretty fast. So this first week's of assignment is actually a lot, or this first week of perspective homework is quite extensive. However, it is what is needed to essentially get all of that going in the proper way. And I'm sure you guys can all understand that we are in the business of making sure that we know this material. We want to be certain that it makes sense to the viewer. Okay, and these are just some really quick added in notes just of the breakdown so that we can have a good accurate sensibility of the assignment. Okay, now I'm going to also attach for you some examples of some homework that that are good for this, So I'll put them in here, and this is basically what you're going to utilize for your assignment sheet. Alrighty, so let me try to find some quick examples for you guys. Alrighty, so I'm going to get some samples and basically put them into the scenes so that we can, or onto the assignment sheet so that we can really see what we're talking about here. And you can use these as just basic guidelines of understanding what the assignment is basically going to be. Now, the most important thing that we want to do is make sure that we understand the material. Okay, and so one of the major things that's important is that we cannot get to the next part of anything unless we realistically just understand what what all this material is about. So, one of the things with this mentorship group is that we cannot let anybody go pass through unless they actually pass with a very solid understanding of each week's material to basically go to the next week. It is the way that we were taught. It is the way that I was kind of brought up within learning a lot of this material, and I think it's the next way for the learning process for it to happen. We really want to make sure that this is a solid learning experience, not just something that you kind of do and enjoy just a little bit, as this is stuff that people try to get very serious within the industry. So we want to make sure that you guys have a very solid understanding of this material. Okay, so now here we have it, guys. Our basic 3-point perspective homework, or excuse me, our perspective homework. Perspective and depth homework. Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to be studying photographs. Photo perspective understanding, you're going to have 9 total submissions. What you're going to be doing is finding 3 photos that are in 1-point perspective. You're going to find 3 photos in 2-point perspective and 3 photos in 3-point perspective. What you're going to do is you're going to find an outline, outlining meaning labeling, the horizon line. Okay, so we'll kind of make sure that these are relevant here. You're going to have to identify your horizon line, your VPs, you're going to figure out your guidelines as well, and you're going to do that for all 9 photos. And you're going to save those, and you're going to submit them. We are going to review them and see what kind of understanding that you take from your from the lesson and how it applies to analyzing photo or other types of materials. Now, sometimes in these photographs, you're going to get this curvilinear kind of understanding. That's what actually happens out there in real life. However, we're not going to be drawing it that way uh, in our images, so we're just going to make sure that we have straight lines. Okay? Now, that is part A. That is the first part of the assignment. The second part of the assignment is going to be your perspective exercises, and there are going to be 9 total submissions from the perspective exercise. And what are those exercises? You're going to study 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, and 3-point perspective. The first thing you're going to do for 1-point perspective is you're going to do a page, or however many pages it takes, to create 10 boxes in perspective and showing depth. You're going to make sure that we see your horizon line labeled, your vanishing point labeled, as well as your 10 boxes with little numbers next to them. For example, just seeing really quickly, this is box 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, we want to make sure that you guys follow the directions properly, because following directions is also a part of being an effective artist and designer. Trust me on this, guys. It's what the industry is really looking for. The second part of 1-point is going to do interior room with furniture. You can see in here that I've chosen 3 different types of rooms. This is actually a cockpit. If you feel wild enough to try to tackle that, I will encourage you guys to do so. But for the 1-point perspective, just a simple room. This one in particular looks to be like an empty kitchen, so you can definitely try to use that, and as well as a 1-point perspective city scene. I would like to make sure to see city elements such as windows, doors, streets, sidewalks, and all that kind of stuff. This is only 1 drawing per idea, so make them good. 2-point perspective, page of boxes, right? We're going to make sure that we label these 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, however many pages it takes to do 10. You're going to do an interior room with furniture. Make sure they're 2-point perspective. And a 2-point perspective scene of a city. Lastly, we're going to be doing 10 boxes in 3-point perspective, labeling them, okay, and how many pages it takes to do 10. An interior of a room with furniture. Okay, you can change that room to other places, garage, a mechanic space, a gym, a swimming pool, a greenhouse, interior of a space shuttle. You can kind of do whatever you like. And lastly, a 3-point perspective assignment. Now, this, guys, right here is a lot of work. Trust me on this. You do not want to sit around and kind of just contemplate on the assignment and try to expect to do the homework all in one day. That is not the way that we recommend doing this. Especially for you guys that are in the mentorship group, it's extremely important to make sure that you guys are doing daily assignments rather than trying to clump it all into one day. This is the effective learning that that we have experienced not only with ourselves, but as we talk to other profound artists, teachers, and other designers in the industry, is that they all recommend or have gone through the process of doing daily exercises versus trying to clump it up all into one day. It's effectively just like exercising. You can't exercise one day and expect it to fulfill your whole month of working out. You have to spread it out, and you have to make sure that you do it consistently. Art and design is no different. All right, guys? So now we have it. This is the assignment, the homework. There's a lot to do, okay? And I'm looking forward to your submissions, guys. Now, if you have any questions, please jot them down. I would actually encourage all of you guys to create your own mentorship journal that will allow you guys to constantly write down questions, thoughts, concerns, um, anything that relates to art, design, personal life, how to get into the industry, what it is to be a good artist, what is the industry looking for, anything that you guys have questions on, feel free to jot down. All right. Now this concludes the demo and lecture for perspective and depth for mentorship group A. We've gone over a lot of materials, so have fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing your submissions, guys. Thanks a lot, and continue to just work hard and keep brainstorming. Thanks a lot.